god Janus. And Janus is actually the only god that the Romans ever really invented. Every other religious figure they used in their society was adapted from another society. And for some strange connection to history, Janus is the unique Roman creation. Now, the features of Janus are that Janus could see into the future and see into the past. He could see, or she could see, what was going to happen and what had already happened. So Janus is known as the Roman god of new beginnings, of new endeavor, of the new year, and of war and peace. The Roman Forum had a Janus gate that was mostly open, because whenever the door was open, it meant Rome was at war, and when the door was closed, it meant they were at peace. The majority of a Roman Roman homes of nobility and well-positioned people would have a Janus image on the doorway, so that when one entered the door from going inside or out, one could touch the image of Janus in much as the same way as you might touch a mezuzah that's on the door and pay respect to the possibility of a positive endeavor. So anyway, it's one of those images that comes from the ancient world that even in the modern world still looks pretty cool. I did not begin the Janis Project with Janus on the top of my mind. What I began the Janis Project with was the idea of making an inflatable sculpture and some of the qualities of that. I'm going to show you just a couple of small projects that I've done to give you a sense of the range of ideas that I've had over the past 30 years. And I'm going to show you this figure here. This is an Olmec head. And these are found in Mexico, and they're from a culture that existed before the Aztecs and the Toltecs were in Mexico. And these heads, which are by and large are about 6 feet tall, 8 feet tall, are discovered in the jungle, just sitting there by themselves. We really know almost nothing about them, except they have an immense presence, and I personally find them just absolutely thrilling to see and look at, because they're like a mountain when you look at them, and yet they're small enough that you can sort of move around them. So this is a project I did in South America, actually going back now, it's more than 25 years ago. And this was a ceramic mosaic bridge in a sculpture park. So if you were jogging through the park, as it crossed this little stream, you would actually run across these figures. I cut the tile for this piece with a couple of workers. We had to cut these down from big tiles. There's about 40,000 pieces in this, and it took us a solid week just to cut them, and then it took us 6 weeks to lay them. Here's another piece in Oxnard, California that I did. And this is that building behind it is a refrigeration plant for strawberries. What you see on the wall in front is a ceramic piece that runs more than the length of a city block. And so I made the piece. Half of the piece I made in Philadelphia, and the other half I actually made in South America. I boxed every piece up, wrapped them all, shipped them in crates, and then flew to Los Angeles and assembled them on the ground and put the piece up. They told me when I put the piece on the wall that I would never see it again like it looked that day, because it would be graffitied by the nightfall. I took this photograph 3 years after it was installed, and it's never been graffitied. And the reason it's never been graffitied is because the people who live across from it actually like it. So anyway, this is another unusual project. I did a theatrical presentation where I did the set design, and then I painted all the costumes. So this is another piece where this was a tropical Amazon-like installation that I did in a convention center. So you entered through a doorway, and then we're in this dark space with the sound of dripping water and birds chirping and little doors and boxes to open and to look at. And then, this is out of sequence, but this is a group of the dancers from the set that I created, and they're featuring the costumes that I painted there. So then, this is a piece that I did in an airport in Philadelphia. These are all luminous sculptures that are set up in an environment that that's a gigantic painting that goes on the floor and the wall, and then these things float in front of it. And if you get the drift of what I'm doing here, is I'm sort of putting art in a place that you hadn't quite expected to find it. You know, it's you might expect to see an ad for handbags or suitcases where I put the art in this particular case. So, 2008, I was invited to be part of an exhibition that took place in Miami during the largest art fair that takes place in America every year in the first week of December. It's called Miami Art Basel. And for that fair, I was invited by a curator to be one of 10 artists who would make monumental inflatable sculptures. I had never made anything like this, but I really wanted to do it. And so this standing figure is my very first inflatable. It's just short of 30 feet tall and about 9 feet across at the base. And here it is on its debut evening. We were hit with a terrific windstorm that night, and to my great relief and pleasure, my piece survived all the wind. Other pieces did not. And I'm going to be exhibiting this piece in Philadelphia during the Pope's visit. I've been invited by an institution to exhibit it on the street in Philadelphia, and the Pope is coming there for a big synod next in September. Here's the same piece on a museum rooftop in the New York State, and here's the same piece in somebody's yard in Palm Beach County, and here it is downtown Miami in the daytime. Here it is in the Pocono Mountains in Pennsylvania, in front of a church. And here it is in Caracas, Venezuela, set up in front of the Tamanaco Hotel with the mountains in the background. And then I took it by plane to the Andes Mountains and then drove in a car from village to village and set it up in the center of the village and invited everyone down to take a photograph, give a little talk, then fold it all up and move on down the road. Here's another one from that group. And the thing that most attracted me about making these sculptures is the fact that they are monumental, quite huge, and are transportable. I don't need to have a heavy shipping cost. I can put this piece where I want it, when I want it. And I carried it on an airplane in a golf bag, and that's all I needed. Okay? So then, this is how one arrives in my studio. This is quite large. It's 24 feet, but it resembles a big potato, in my opinion. You know, this is the beginning. And so this is the first time in the early days when I was making them. I've made a number of them now, but they're kind of costly to make. And so what I try to do is, ever since 2008, I try to make one a year with the idea that each time I'll learn more new things, and at the same time, I can justify spending that much money once. I can't do it 2 or twice in a year. So anyway, we're going to move along. So I get it, and then I decided to paint it. So for me, this was kind of a seminal moment. I had to paint this whole piece. I had 4 days before it was to be exhibited. So we just set it up in somebody's backyard, and I proceeded to paint. I had no idea what I was going to do. I just worked it out as I was making it. And as you can see, it required a lot of bending and crawling around on the ground and climbing ladders. And I want you to note that that ladder is standing on top of a table that's standing on top of another table. I think this is not an OSHA-approved method of painting. And so you can see this is not a good setup. So anyway, 4 days, and it starts to come together. And this is at the very end of the painting process. All those rings and those sticks that you see, they're not really there. They're fake. I painted them to look like they were there. And it's a particular painting technique called trompe-l'oeil, which is to fool the eye. And so here is the same piece on exhibit in Miami, in New York State in a museum. And here it is out in the snow in a museum in New Jersey. And this was taken in Baltimore with me in the middle. And this was at the Baltimore, the Maryland Institute College of Art, where I was invited to give a talk, and I brought my inflatables with me. Now this is another piece, and this is the last of the really tall ones. And I think this is a very successful piece, and it has a lot of ideas in it that I really like, but I've switched my strategy to the smaller size of the piece that's here on the ship right now. So anyway, this piece is a whopping 30 feet tall. That's me down there in the bottom. And if you see up at the top, there's a window in the top right here that lets the light in. And there's another window like that down in the belly on this side over here, right here, that you can look into. So when you look inside, this is what you see. The inside is painted with the face of Jonah. So it's in the belly of the whale. And the light that comes from the windows in the roof are the eyes of the fish. They let the light in. It swells with light. And it's amazing because the fabric is black, but it looks white when you look inside. And I didn't plan that. And so there it is, exhibited in front of a high school. And again, looking inside to see the face of Jonah. And so, as you can see, I very much like this idea of interactivity and the mobility of moving it around. I love the sense of discovery that comes with these pieces, that when you get close to them, there's something to discover about them. And so, this is, after that exhibit, I got this idea. This is an art gallery in New York City, and the gallery represents the most famous Chinese artist in the world. And the dealer had talked to me at that last show with that big fish with the Jonah on the inside, and he wanted to know whether or not I could control the size of these pieces and what I could do. He had a whole lot of questions that really made me rethink what I was doing. So after his conversation, I did a whole new round of research, and I came up with a new way of making the pieces. This is the first one of my new 12-foot or 10-foot pieces, and you see the window there. There's another big face on the inside of this piece. But what I did was I put it on a plane, and I flew from Miami to New York, and I walked into this art gallery, and I just set it up in the gallery, which, again, is a kind of, taking it to another level. And so starts at that point. This is the very beginning of the piece that's here on the ship right now. This is how it started. So I get it's kind of like an amorphous blob of a shape that gets sent to me from the company who is actually going to fabricate it. And then I take that that blob and I draw on it with colored pencils and transform it. I digitalize that drawing and send it back to them, and then they translate that in a machine and they produce a three-dimensional image. I then draw on that and adjust it more. They remodify it. So we play computer tag for weeks. And then I looked at the image and I realized I liked the face a great deal, but the backside was boring. So I said, well, could we do this? Double it up. And we did. And now I have pushed the designers. This is the maximum that we could get out of it in terms of size. And after I saw this, I said, this is great, except it's a Janis. I immediately recognized what it was, and I said, could we do this? Change the color. My Janis has two colors. The Romans would have had only one. The reason I have two colors is because people come in different colors. And the opportunity of just making that statement that whether you're looking forward or back, that's just how it is. So that was, at this point, that's as far as I could get. And then I approved everything and we made it. And I got, let me see what I got this delivered to me. This is what it looked like before I painted it. And it came, this is the cool part too, if you've never seen it set up, it fits, everything's inside that bag. So when I unzip those two sides, it falls down and it becomes the base. And the piece, the motor, the pump, everything's inside of that. You plug it in and it begins springing the air up and fills from below. So it's completely self-contained, so you can pack it away. And this is the dark side and the light side. I was extremely happy at this point because I had realized I had crossed many bridges of difficulty, and I had something that I was really, really, felt like now I'm ready to go to the next place. So what I would do at that point is I set it up in my studio and took a photograph of it, then printed the photograph out on an ordinary household printer, and then proceed to draw on it with colored pencils to arrive at how I was going to paint it. So I would do different treatments until I was happy. And so that's one side, and then the other. And then I paint it. So this is a picture in my studio as it's inflating. And it looks like it's coming up out of the floor from below. And here's the other side doing the same thing. And then there it is fully inflated in the room. And as soon as I saw it, I was pretty certain that I had achieved exactly what I wanted for the first time with one of these inflatables. I felt there's a lot of success all the way along the curve here, but this one was the one that really took me to another place. So now, the next part of what I was doing was to get the Janis out of my studio into the world. So I shared a photograph of it with a small museum in Philadelphia that is the largest African-American publishing press in the United States. And as soon as they saw it, they were extremely interested and wanted to know if I could bring it to Philadelphia where they could put it on display, which they did in front of their museum right downtown on the street. And this photograph was taken 4 days before I left for Istanbul to begin this adventure. Because as I got, as I said, this institution immediately became interested in the piece. The same day, the people at Oceana saw the piece and asked if I would be willing to consider bringing it with me to the ship. And we put together, cobbled together, a kind of an agenda and a plan. And there's a lot of technical things that were involved in sort of getting everybody on board and I mean on board in the sense that agreeing to do this. And then lastly, of course, was we needed to have the approval of the CEO. And so we went through many steps at the home office, and we had worked out all these things. And I said, by the way, has anybody gotten the CEO's approval? And they said, well, we thought maybe you would be willing to try that. So I did. I sent him a couple of pictures and asked for his approval. And, the man who built this, he founded this company, built this boat, and put 10 Picassos and the countless other beautiful things that there are on the ship, and built the only 2 ships that are floating on the ocean with a working art studio, has a high tolerance for adventure in the arts. And so I feel very, very fortunate to be on his Rolodex and to be known to him. And so the approval started with this gesture, and then here it is on the street in Malta, and here it is on the grand staircase outside, and here it is in the lobby, as you saw when you came on your first day, and up on the deck overlooking the ocean, and lastly, looking over the pool in a kind of noble placement. And I sent pictures of this, just that I just showed you, to Frank Del Rio, the CEO of the company, and he wrote back and he said, is that 1 piece or 2 pieces or 3 pieces, or what am I looking at? And I had to explain what we were seeing. And then his answer was, way cool, all right? So I really feel that I calculated that I started in Istanbul, and we will be finishing the project in St. Petersburg on the 14th of August. And during that time, there will be 13,000 guests on the ships who will have had intimate contact with this sculpture, plus all the workers on the ship, plus anyone else who manages to wander into the project. And for me, the way the project, I don't even know where the project is going other than the fact this is how much I've charted out for it. And so for me, the thing that has to happen is that as many people as they can take a photograph, put it online, share it with somebody else, ask them to pass it along, and it will slowly generate its own momentum. But yeah, as you can see, it's not afraid of the wind or the sun or the cold or the heat. It's very durable. It is made out of a very, very strong nylon fabric. It's a one-of-a-kind piece. It's all, been all handmade. And it's something that I feel extremely satisfied with. I think it addresses many of my own personal interests, as I showed you in some of the earlier works that I showed you. And secondly, I have a few exhibitions in public spaces, museums coming up. So I have 3 more in production that I'm working on. And my plan is to be able to put 3 or 4 in a single room. And I want to create a mini Stonehenge out of my air-filled people. Now, one last note. A lot of my paintings use a fish called the koi fish, which is a truly sacred fish in Asia. And when I was in school, I did quite a bit of study on the arts of Asia, and I don't want to pretend to be an Asian painter because I'm not, but some of the ideas that Asian art has are extremely interesting to me. The idea of empty space in Asian art is oftentimes seen as the space that is nothing that means everything. And it means that it gives shape to the things that it's around. And so I love the fact that my giant, or my Janis, is filled with air, the only air we breathe. So it's responding to the environment. I spent 15 years ago, I spent a year with my family living in the rainforests of South America. And during that time, I was emotionally and spiritually reborn. My passion for the landscape and for the land, it was elevated. my interest in light and air and water. And so the paintings that I make are fish that live in water, and I make paintings that look wet. This sculpture that I make is filled with air, and the paint that I work with is just the dirt from the ground, and so there's a connection there. So all those things together put me in the spot of being able to make a sculpture that I think has cultural relevance, the last part of which I changed the spelling of my Janis from Janis with a U-S to an I-S, because the Roman declension of U-S indicated masculine gender. I think we live in a time where gender is not so automatically articulate, and I wanted to obscure the gender a little bit, make it genderless. So by doing that, I believe that in my piece I was able to address culturally contemporary themes. If you want to know why I use this tribal painting, it's because one of the things I learned from Indians in the rainforests of South America is that they paint themselves because they see themselves as being too ugly to present themselves to God and to the world looking the way they would without their paint. And there's not a person on this ship who wouldn't go out in the morning without treating their face and addressing those issues. And indigenous peoples all across the globe always had this issue of insecurity about how we look. And so I pay tribute to the insecurity of the past by using this paint method that would be found in a tribal setting and connect to to all of our roots, which lie deep in the forest of the earth. And hopefully I've given you a little insight into what I was trying to do and give you a reason why I was trying to do it. Okay, does anybody have any quick questions? Did I explain it all okay? Yes, sir. What's that? It's almost impossible to puncture, but if it did, I could sew it and I could mend it. The toughest thing I have to do is manage the paint a little bit because it gets up and down so much. It does, but I'm working on that's one last detail, and I'm experimenting with textile paints that are meant to expand and contract much more frequently. Okay, anybody else? Well, thank you so much for giving me any of this beautiful day. And if you have further questions, come up and visit me in the Artist Loft. Okay? Thank you.